Hello, environmental sociology students. I am providing a short video discussion with the PowerPoint for this week for one particular really portion of this PowerPoint presentation, which is an application of the treadmill of production theory, which you'll see here in the next couple of slides. I'm doing this to complement the claim made by Sal Griffins, the engineer whose podcast you are listening to for this week's discussion, week 7's discussion, for us to think more about his claim that our emphasis on increasing energy efficiency in a fossil fuel dependent energy system is not going to get us where we need to be to keep global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius pre-industrial levels. It's not going to work. Therefore, we need to transform our current energy system. We're essentially out of time for doing so. So we have to act now, is his argument. That oftentimes when people hear that, when people hear a claim like that, they immediately think of, oh my gosh, this is then going to result in all sorts of potential negative side effects, sacrifices. We're going to be giving up all sorts of things that we enjoy and are used to, and in our lifestyles. And he tries to make it very clear in the podcast that that is absolutely not the way it needs to happen, and that we have the technology, we have the capability to live the life that we're used to living with a completely transformed energy system that is not at all dependent on fossil fuels. So this is completely doable. And we also can recognize and feel good about that we don't have to make any drastic sacrifices. And in fact, the energy system that is rooted in fossil fuels never has been all that great for us in a number of ways. Fossil fuels, and these are, the three main fossil fuels that we have been reliant on, more recently natural gas, but traditionally oil and coal, have always brought with them a number of negative environmental and social externalities. Always have brought negative environmental and social externalities, and those negative externalities have accumulated, and they have intensified, and to the point where we are facing the existential crisis of climate change. But the cost of dealing with these negative externalities and the number of people who actually have benefited from fossil fuels, the costs have increased and the number of people that have benefited have decreased. And so this is not something then to mourn moving away from this system, but something that we could actually feel excited about and hopeful for. So one way to look at that is to look at one of the fossil fuels, which is coal. And coal is the one that is still the most plentiful in availability to us globally, not in all places. Most of the easy access coal has been consumed in places like Appalachia, where West Virginia is at in the United States. But there are other areas of the country like Wyoming that has a lot of access, or that has access to still a lot of cheap coal. So you can keep that in mind. But coal is the dirtiest. It comes with some of the greatest environmental and social costs. The treadmill of production, one of the key reasons why I am providing this video with this PowerPoint for this week is to help you review one of the theories introduced in chapter 1 that uh, may appear, will appear at least in some parts of the midterm. So to review that, it also will be a theory that will be looked at some more in future chapters of the book. So to clarify the treadmill of production theory and to look at it in relationship to the coal industry, the treadmill of coal. So the treadmill of producing coal, and to think about what are we actually sacrificing here, and what could be gained by dismantling the treadmill of coal and transforming it into something else. So the other thing I just wanted to mention is that the extra credit assignment that is posted is a very short article that applies the treadmill of production theory. In fact, I think I can just switch it over here. It's called Using the Treadmill of Production to Inform a Political Economy Approach to Green Criminology. So it says it's 5 pages, but it's really only 4 pages in length. Super short. It's actually really pretty easy to understand. They lay out the treadmill of production very well, I think, in this short little article. So it would be a good review piece, even if you don't do the extra credit assignment, just to take a look at it. One of the things that is noted with the treadmill of production theory in this article is that the treadmill of production looks at how different vested interests, how they are connected together in this treadmill, and how they really can become very dependent on it to keep it to keep the treadmill going. So capitalists, sometimes their interests are also just referred to the interests of capital, which you will see in this article. Capitalists would be like the owners of a coal plant, a coal mine. Laborers can become very dependent on a treadmill of production because it's their jobs, which is attached to their ways of life, which oftentimes is attached to their communities and wanting to maintain a heritage within their communities, as well as we'll see with the article we look at, their social identity. And then the state, which is political actors at the local, at the state, and at the national level, has an interest also in keeping these treadmills going because the state helps to set the rules and to manage an economy. Got to keep the economy going, but it also has to settle disputes between labor and capitalist. But overall, it wants to see the economic system that it is supporting for it to work well. And so, how does the state interact with how political institutions interact with capitalist economic organizations? And so that's one of the sides. That's one of the ways to look at the state. So I don't want to go particularly into a long bit about that right here, but just to emphasize that. The other thing that's interesting about this very short little piece is it shows another externality, another negative social outcome that can be associated with an environmental concern like coal production, which is crime. And so it identifies here how crime can be an outcome of a treadmill of production of coal. So this short little reading again can help you review this theory, help you prepare for the exam, whether or not you decide to do the extra credit assignment with it. All right, so the treadmill of production and coal. This is the title of the article that was published in 2010 in the journal Sociological Spectrum. And it looks at mountaintop removal and how in places like West Virginia, that has become the main way in which coal is mined today is this process of mountaintop removal and literally like taking the tops off of mountains and uh, to get at the coals in the mountain seams. So, why this very energy and capital intensive technology? When we say a capital intensive technology, we're talking about a technology that's super expensive. So, there's not a lot of, you're not going to get a lot of competition in an industry where some people have the money to buy machinery, right, that can literally take off the top of mountains, right? So it's a very expensive um, type of machinery. So why? So the treadmill production theory always looks at the economic incentives of how to produce something in a given current economic system. The system of capitalism is about increasing profit for owners of the means of production. Owners in this case are like owners of coal mining operations. So to increase profits, one way they can do that is by increasing efficiency. A key to increasing efficiency in industrial organizations is mechanization. So, one key way industries, coal is one, not the only one, that they can become more efficient to make more product at a cheaper cost is to replace human labor with machines, right? So once they are able to profit from producing whatever it is they are produce with the labor they have, they can take a portion of those profits rather than giving workers wages, higher wages, more benefits. They can take that money, and oftentimes they do, and they invest it in machinery. And this definitely happened in coal mining. And so what happens there then is it shifts mining methods away from the more labor intensive to the more capital intensive. So, and what that then results in, you have employment in coal production actually going down. So, the more industry uses machines, the fewer people are actually employed in coal mining. So, there has been significant job loss in the coal industry for many decades now. And it's not been because of environmental laws, it's not been because of environmentalists, it's been largely driven by mechanization. So, the next couple of slides will help to illustrate this. The other uh, uh, aspect of the treadmill production of coal that is noted here, it says the most affected by pollution and environmental damage are the most dependent on jobs in polluting industries, meaning they have fewer economic choices. So, and this is oftentimes an issue an industry where you have a lot of low paid labor. So, they make enough maybe to keep themselves and their families afloat, but, they don't have a lot of um, surplus money, right, or disposable income so that they have choices, that they feel like they can easily move. Or sometimes their choices are constrained because they are dependent on jobs that are in the area in which they live, and they may feel an attachment to that area because of their cultural heritage. So that's an aspect to think about as well. So living in or near energy sacrifice zone, meaning this is environmental justice communities that are disproportionately harmed by the production of fossil fuels, right? So, what does that look like? And that's what we'll look at with this piece. This shows that from 1945 to 2005, employment in coal and also coal production. So, we can see we just start here, and this is coal production um, here. That's what the diamond is coal production. You can barely see the circle underneath there is employment. But coal production in 1985 starts to go up. It goes down a little bit in 1995, but it's been a pretty steady, up, it's kept a pretty steady pace. Um, and it's been greater than in previous years. As coal production has increased, coal employment has decreased. And you can see this particularly from the late 80s and down. And this has been largely due to mechanization. This is US coal mining employment from 1923 to 2014. And you can see high numbers employed here. This is, people working men primarily, working in the coal mines. How far this goes down to, 2014. Not a lot of people employed in coal today. So, the economics of coal production, the treadmill of production theory focuses on what are the economics of the environmental concern. And so, just for this article, it is noted that in West Virginia in 2004, 7% of the total gross state product um, was coal tax revenue. Coal generated 7% of the overall revenue fund, and then personal tax income that could be associated with coal was 37%. West Virginia is second today. So this is including, actually, I've actually included here some more recent data to complement that 2010 article, The Treadmill of Production and Coal. But coal, West Virginia is second today to Wyoming for coal production. Coal is and has been for a while on the decline. So in 2011, the top 4 companies were worth 34 billion. By 2016, they are worth 150 million. A lot of bankruptcy being claimed in the coal industry, and this is because a lot of the easy access coal, or most of it, is gone on the East Coast. That's why they're removing tops of mountains. And then there's been, a lot dealing with a lot of the costs of coal production has also cut into their profits. Employment in 2016 in Wyoming, the top coal producing state, there was 5,756 coal miners, about 11% of the national total. You can see that how many people employed in West Virginia. The entire coal industry, including mines and power plants, employs roughly 160,000 people. Compared to 375,000 in the solar industry. This is from a 2017 US Energy and Employment report that's linked here that you can look at. But here's a table from that report which shows the top energy sectors. Oil production, 2017, ranked number 1. That's the total number of people employed, and right under oil in 2017 already, right? This was 4 years ago, right? Solar was second. It's already employing a lot of people. It is ready and set to go. Coal, 2017, is down here, all right? There's wind, and there is nuclear. Okay, so mountaintop removal, your book talks about this. I also have a video for the extra credit assignment. Again, you can just watch it if you're interested. That discusses the problems associated with mountaintop removal, environmental and social, and the resistance to that. But there's a whole bunch of negative environmental problems that stem from mountaintop removal. Natural disasters like the collapse of mountains that then result in mudslides, and what's sliding down those mountains, is slurry from coal, which is basically coal sludge, right? And water, which is just laced with numerous chemicals and pollutants. I mean, that's what's coming down at you and taking out your house, and your drinking water supply, etc. So there's all kinds of negative environmental externalities that are associated with coal, starting with removal, uh, to the processing of it, to the moving it. There's also a lot of problems with coal trucks moving through mountains, a lot of accidents that are associated with them. Um, and they've been a point of conflict in some cases in communities, for example, in Appalachia. Um, but the human health impacts are quite extensive. This is only one example of one of the human health impacts. But energy, when you live in energy sacrifice zones or in environmental justice communities, one of the things that characterizes them is, having a disproportionate number of people in your community that are dealing with a variety of health problems, right? And so have a high communities with a high disease load, from cancers to respiratory problems to skin problems. You know, it's oftentimes a range of them. Um, and again, some of this is discussed in your reading or in the chapter. So, given all these negative externalities, why does industry resist? Making changes. Why does industry continue with? Why is industry allowed to continue producing as they can? For a while, this is here because every once in a while it crops up in our public conversations about energy and what are we doing with fossil fuels and climate change and and then you'll get some politicians and they'll get some scientists to speak for them that will say, yeah, we can do clean coal. There's a thing called clean coal. One of the notions behind clean coal is that you can make coal-fired power plants carbon neutral. So that's what that CCS is: carbon capture and storage and sequestration. This is only, though, with the burning of coal. So there is technology for that. However, it's very expensive, it's very energy intensive, and the overall savings you get in terms of reducing carbon for then the amount of energy you're actually going to get for that, it's not a very good ratio. Historical roots of our dependency on coal, our economic dependency on coal. Some look at and use models of internal colonialism, looking at areas where people become subordinated to powerful interests outside of their communities. Certainly in the United States, with settler colonialism, the removal of indigenous people from the land and the loss of their legal rights. But also many of the new settlers, colonialists that came to these areas, came to them and were recruited to them um, by like coal companies, for example. They were poor and they were looking for an opportunity to, have to be able to make a living and have a life. Coal companies established what was called company towns throughout Appalachia. And again, they recruited labor. Oftentimes, these were European immigrants coming to this country who were looking for a better life. So they recruited labor to these towns, but they set them up in a way that created a lot of dependency of labor on the companies. So for example, in the employees in coal would be paid in script. It wasn't even US money. This is company money that was called script. And only in the stores in these company towns would only take script. So it really reduces your economic choices when you don't have the money that other people in the country have, and you can only use this one type of money basically in your community. Kept them very economically dependent on these coal companies, which could help to reduce, labor rebellions associated with their work conditions, which were always very risky. High mortality rates and sickness, black lung disease. You've heard of that, right? So people tend to not, want better. So how do you keep them uh, from really being able to advocate well for themselves? So this is certainly one strategy. Also, it was established in these communities was, a gender division of labor. So men were minors, women were housewives. That people made just enough money for to be able to support this family structure. But oftentimes it was just enough. You've heard, the country music singers like Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn and others, certainly have made famous that this was not a life of luxury, and it wasn't a life of people living high on the hog, as some might say, right? They were, barely making it, but they made it, and there was a lot of pride in that too. Treadmill of production, that's TOP, looks at, again, this reciprocal relationship between environmental and social impact. So one of the key questions that has been asked is, why do exploited communities support more environmental and social exploitation? Why would they get behind this? And one of the things that's noted, this is super, super important, and I hope that you made it this far to hear this, and we'll be coming back to this in future chapters, is that this never happens without companies, without those in power, making a big effort to create dependency and to uh, erect barriers for people, erect barriers so people really can't or don't see a way to improve their conditions. The companies purposely and have always intentionally done this. This was the purpose of the company town, paying people in script, right? Eventually that, there was enough. There's always resistance in these systems, and there was resistance, and that system has pretty much been transformed. But what are the new methods that companies use? That's where AstroTurf campaigns come in. AstroTurf campaigns are what some people call fake grassroots organizations. They look like a grassroots community organization, an organization that's popped up in your local town to try to do something, to improve community life, get more scholarships for your kids so they can go to college, right? Whatever it might be. But these AstroTurf campaigns, AstroTurf, they're fake. They're really organizations that are funded by and created by industry, by those who hold these positions of power and who are making the profit, who are making the wealth from exploiting the land and the people in these communities, as is the case with coal. So in the article that I identified for you, they look at a organization that popped up in West Virginia called Friends of Coal. A few years ago, when my class was talking about this, a student in the class has spent the summer doing an internship in West Virginia, actually, and was aware of, very familiar with Friends of Coal, because Friends of Coal has made themselves very known throughout West Virginia. How have they made themselves known? That's what I will explain here. So they were established in 2002, and coal is constantly, or has been under attack for many, many decades due to environmental and social exploitation. This organization was established to try to boost the reputation of coal and to create a community commitment to the coal industry. And it used two primary strategies to do this. Um, I mean, three really. The first is making themselves look like this community organization that just popped up to help people see how great coal is for them. But the two strategies they use is that Friends of Coal appropriated cultural symbols in the area. And coal has always been very much tied to masculine identities. So, the cultural symbol of being a miner. In Nebraska, it might be the cultural symbol of being a farmer, like a husker, right? But anyways, miners, it's a very working class identity, but the miner was a working class man who didn't have to go and get a fancy college education to support themselves and a family and to be the provider, of a family. Very highly valued for those, for uh, masculine, very highly valued in traditional masculinity. Football players, military, NASCAR drivers, outdoorsmen, fishermen, hunters, right? All highly valued masculine identities in West Virginia. So getting people who hold these identities and getting them to become public spokespeople for coal and putting them on advertisements and creating all kinds of um, uh, community messaging using them about how great coal is for their community and defending the coal industry against those evil environmentalists who are going to put them out of work, taking attention away from the fact that they've been losing jobs, and they've been losing jobs not because of environmentalists but because of things like mechanization and the fact that maybe political leaders are not working to develop new industries in their communities to employ people, given that easy access coal is no longer there, right? So what's next? Where's your career? Where are the leaders to help lead that path? The second then is the visible presence in the cultural landscape. And this is where my former student said this was so obvious. Billboards, signs, and businesses with Friends of Coal logo, Friends of Coal slogans, Friends of Coal spokespersons like, the miners, the football players, the military, etc., promoting coal and how great it is for the communities and just papering the landscape, buildings, yards, um, fields as much as you can with their images, and then sponsoring events like providing scholars and scholarships to high school students for college. They actually started a couple football bowls, college bowls, as another way to sort of promote. Um, Look, Cole is behind us. They're going to let us have a football bowl kind of thing. So those are the some very powerful ways in which um, people can be swayed, right, to stick with a way of life that actually isn't very healthy for them, right? It could actually be harming them. But because they feel that they're getting a payoff and by standing by coal, I'm standing by my cultural identity. By standing by coal, I'm standing by those men and my family, my grandfather, who worked in the coal mine and sacrificed. He died young for his family, from black lung disease, right? So there's another kind of payoff that people can get by you know sort of buying into or accepting this story that the coal industry is telling. And it is a story. Stories can match facts and stories don't have to match facts, right? But it is a story, and it's a powerful one, and one in which the authors of this article suggest has helped to tie people to an industry that doesn't employ a whole lot of people anymore in their communities, doesn't do much for them. Where it does exist, it's caused a whole lot of environmental and health problems. But it's kept enough people from challenging their political interests of coal. So it keeps people from supporting things like new energy systems, and transitioning to that, because that then becomes a threat to this way of life that, somehow this, was um, mythically in many ways um, fabulous for people, and people sort of wanting to, can't we just go back to that, this wonderful way of life that we once had before the environmentalists came in, and the socialists and everybody else that wants to rip it away from us. And so that's one way to see how people can become tied to something that isn't actually very beneficial to them. But it has to be, that tie is constructed. A story was told. So that's been one of my themes. What's the new story that we could tell that might move us to something different? All right. That's that. Have a good day, night, whenever you're watching this, and see ya.